all present and accounted for. Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to this session on local scale housing solutions. I know that there are some incredibly fascinating conversations happening across all three breakout rooms, so glad that you can be here in this one. And let's also acknowledge that everything is being recorded, so if you miss anything, then you can catch up on that later too. I want to acknowledge that I am joining you from Wurundjeri country in Naarm or Melbourne, and I pay my respects to Indigenous elders past and present, and also to any Indigenous people who may be joining us for today's discussion. I give thanks also to Auntie Georgina for her welcome to country at the beginning of this event. I think that Indigenous perspectives are always really important, but are particularly relevant in the context of the current conversation, especially given the huge disproportionate amount of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women experiencing housing stress and homelessness. My name is Kate Raynor, and I'm a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Melbourne. My research relates to cross-sectoral relationships for affordable housing, and I'm particularly interested in how different organisations bring together the policy, funding, land, and partnerships necessary to build housing and the services that that households need.
Hey.
Hey. Is someone trying to say something? You might need to mute yourself. Thanks. I don't know how you're unmuted. We're talking about social housing solutions in this panel, so it was really good to see how strong a focus that was in the previous session with the politicians. In the last 15 years, Australia's social housing stock has grown by less than 2,000 dwellings per year on average. 2,000 dwellings per year. That's despite rapid population growth and research that tells us that we need to be building at least 7,000 new dwellings every year just to maintain our current very low levels of social housing. And research that tells us that we need to be building 36,000 dwellings per year. So 18 times what we're currently doing if we were to meet our housing shortage for social housing over the next 20 years. So there is a massive gap between what we're currently doing and what we need to be doing, with very real implications for older women, as we heard so tellingly from Penny and from Linda earlier today. So responding to that gap is far from unprecedented in Australia's history, but it will require a huge effort from every sector. Lots of capacity building, consistent government funding and policy, and organisations delivering best practice housing and care. We need action right now, and some of that excellent work is already happening, and this session is about showcasing some examples of where that's occurring. So that's why I'm excited to be convening a discussion with such an impressive lineup of speakers. Every person on this panel has been directly involved in delivering, funding, or advocating for affordable housing for lower income households, especially for older women. I've asked each of our panelists to reflect on a particular project or program they've been involved in and to pass on some of their wisdom about how we get more housing delivered in Australia. The projects are distributed across the country and are at varying stages of progress, including a very recent scoop from Victoria's big housing build. I've asked each of our panelists to talk to their experiences, and we'll have time for questions at the end. The order that we're following is starting with Peter Sibly, followed by Cheryl Axelby, Erin Dolan, and then Rebekah Oelkers. I should also acknowledge that we were originally going to hear from Jenny Beetson-Mortimer from the Northern Rivers Community Gateway, but unfortunately Jenny is really ill today, and so Peter has extremely generously decided to step in at the last moment, and we're incredibly grateful for that. Two little notes of housekeeping before I hand over to the panelists. The first is that you're all muted, or you should be, but you are very welcome to talk to each other throughout the chat function as we were doing in the earlier session so successfully. So please communicate with each other, send questions in, and I will be looking at them throughout the presentation so we can pass them on to the panelists. It's always good to have your reflections. The only other piece of housekeeping is that your viewing experience will be more pleasant if you set your Zoom to speaker view. And the way that you do that is you can click the little bubble at the top right-hand corner of your screen. It says view, click on that, and you have a choice between speaker or gallery. Speaker is probably going to be nicer. So without any further ado, I would like to hand over to Peter. Peter has worked the majority of his life in the not-for-profit sector and has held a number of different community housing positions in Latrobe Valley and in the western suburbs of Melbourne. He's currently the General Manager of the United Housing Co-operative in Yarraville, which manages 102 social housing properties, and hopefully soon will be more. He has served as the Housing for the Aged Action Group Treasurer since 2017 and brings with him a wealth of experience in management, finance and governance. So if you're ready to turn on your camera, Peter, I'll pass over to you.
Thanks very much, Kate. I have got my camera on. I hope you can see me. I also like to pay my respects to the Wurundjeri people, the traditional custodians of the land and sea of the western suburbs where we're located, and where we intend to construct the Footscray Lines Cooperative Village, which is what I would like to talk to you about. So UHC is one of the 22 community housing agencies that has been a recipient of the Big Housing Bill Social Housing Growth Fund, which will be delivering 2,300 homes across Victoria. And I would like to acknowledge state Labor government's great initiative in investing in good quality social housing that will provide sustainable housing for many low-income people for many years to come. I do believe it's a very brave decision in the face of complete lack of federal government leadership at this time. So I think we need to acknowledge that. And I'm sure some people would have preferred more public housing response, including HAG to some extent, and some community housing organisations may feel a little let down, but I believe our proposal does provide a great alternative option for older women. So quickly, we secured a 15.3 million grant to redevelop the Footscray Lines Senior Village in West Footscray. The government contributed 75% of the capital, and we contribute 25%, the two partner organisations. And UHC will manage that over 20 years with a further option of another 20 years. We hope the works will commence in December, and we hope it's completed by March 23. We're currently in the process of relocating 21 older women who are living in bed sits on the site, badly in need of upgrading. So we're relocating them, and they'll have the first right of return to come back to the village. And quickly, UHC is a smaller organisation. We're managed by member directors or tenant directors. 6 of our board members are women, and we manage, as you said, 102 properties across the inner west. We were lucky to be funded, being a smaller organisation, I believe it brings many benefits, but it also sort of has given rise to a few resourcing challenges. We're focused on our development. We're focused on older women mainly because of many of the issues mentioned by previous speakers in relation to gender inequality, women's vulnerability in the private marketplace. But we're also building on the Lines Village current legacy and wanting to provide alternative options for a lot of our older tenant members who need more suitable accommodation to age in place. We also are considering the concept of intergenerational housing, where in the longer term we may include younger family members or younger women with children in some of our 2-bedroom units. But given the high demand from older women, our focus will initially be on older women. We must select priority applicants, 75% of priority applicants off the Victorian Housing Register. But UHC also tries to attract women or members generally in our other housing that have an interest in being part of a community or being part of a cooperative. Not just a home, it's also membership of the cooperative, which brings certain responsibilities, lots of benefits, and but we acknowledge it doesn't appeal to all people. The design, we have brought together a really inspired project team, we believe, who have designed an apartment block consisting of 49 1 and 2 bedroom unit apartments that are going to be built over 2 and 3 stories. The apartments vary in size from about 55 metres squared to 70 metres squares, which achieve a very high NAITHS 7-star and 6 Green Star standard. So big emphasis on sustainability, adaptability and ageing in place. We will have 2 wheelchair accessible units, 3 platinum standard apartments, and the rest will be silver standard with universal design principles. So they're very much focused on adaptability and sustainability. We've had a number of user consultation sessions and met with older residents and older members of HAG, UHC and the current residents to assist us in the design. But the main feature of the design, which you sort of can see in the concepts on screen, is we're designed around a central courtyard area. There's we'll have, and there's a community facility, provision for community gardens, community orchard, and we are trying very hard to get solar power. The model is basically, you know, we all know secure affordable housing is the basis of a healthy life. But we believe the cooperative model provides additional outcomes for tenants over many years. And we can successfully prove that by some of the outcomes we've had. But the model firmly, the co-op model is different in that the residents will form a residents group and will have direct input to the management of the communal areas, including the communal gardens, orchard and community facility. They'll have direct input to governance and the broader cooperative through representation to the board of directors. Our staffing model includes a communications officer and we have a strong focus of organising community engagement activities and other activities that provides a sort of an inbuilt support network for the co-op members. We have about to start our community consultation process. We met with the council last week, Melbourne City Council, and they gave strong endorsement for the design, which is good. We expect some pushback from the community, but we're hopeful we can work through that process. So I guess just in summing up, I do believe there's a lot of opportunities out there. This was the first round of the Victorian Labor government's Big Build program. There is 3 more rounds to go. It's important that groups get organised and try to look at how they can develop a proposal. It's not easy. It's been really hard work and continues to be hard work. We're just at that process of starting the build, community consultation, then the build. But I would really encourage groups to start thinking about alternative models. I am hopeful that our model will stand up as something that provides an alternative for women that do want to be part of a community. I think I'm running out of time, but there's a number of challenges I could talk about, but perhaps we can talk about that later. But anyway, that's our proposal, a cooperative model which focuses on women over 55, and there'll be lots of opportunity for engagement. And we believe the cooperative model is an empowering model, and hopefully it provides a good alternative. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Peter. And I'm seeing in the chat lots of questions, so we will have time to return to these topics at the end of this conversation. I'm going to pass over to Cheryl now, And Cheryl Axelby is a proud Narungga woman. She has held the role of CEO of Aboriginal Legal Rights Movement and national co-chair of National Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Legal Services. But she is here today in her capacity as the Relationship Manager for Aboriginal Community Housing Limited in South Australia, with a really exciting new project to talk about. So thank you so much for being here, Cheryl. I hand over to you.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for the opportunity. And I'd also just like to pay my respects. Bring up the next slide if I can. Sorry about that. I'd like to do an acknowledgement. So, as visitors and ACHL, we reflect our deep respect while we learn, live, and work on Kaurna country. I'm from South Australia. I'm a Narungga woman, and my people come from the York Peninsula. And I feel very privileged to be here presenting and sharing the quite exciting opportunity that we have in South Australia in actually building an independent elders living village on beautiful Kaurna country. So we also acknowledge that we are visitors on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. We recognise and respect Kaurna cultural heritage beliefs and relationships with their land. And also we extend that respect to the cultural authority of everybody present here today. And I'd like to pay special acknowledgement to our First Nations elders and brothers and sisters from across Australia who are also present today. And also, you know, the wonderful welcome that we had from Aunty Georgina this morning. Again, just a lovely reminder that our land, will always be Aboriginal land and that we've never ceded our sovereignty. So Aboriginal Community Housing Limited, who we are and what we do. We were established in 2016. Our vision is about empowering Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities to develop, own and manage culturally appropriate, affordable and sustainable housing. And what we do, we support Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities to develop, build, manage, operate, own well-designed and maintained housing solutions through tenancy management, property management, new housing development, property condition scoping, reporting and community development and engagement. The lovely opportunity I'm going to talk to you today is about the Aboriginal Elders Independent Living Village. The history of this is that in June 2021, there was a $10 million budget announcement to create a purpose-built village on Kaurna country for Aboriginal elders living independently in Adelaide. The Elders Village will be built close to Wrapup, which is a culturally significant Kaurna site near the Sturt River in Bedford Park, and the scenery you see behind me is part of the Wrapup beautiful landscape and the country of Kaurna country. A partnership was formed with the not-for-profit housing provider ACHL, which is who I work for as its relationship manager for South Australia, the Indigenous Land and Sea Corporation, the Kaurna Yurta Aboriginal Corporation, and also it's developing its own trust called the Punkara Trust. So we have membership from the board of directors from the trust and the South Australian Housing Authority. The proposed development will include 40 individual homes to be built on 1.3 hectares of a proportion of ILC owned property that is located 13 kilometres south of the central business district. And Wrapup is a very special place to the Kaurna peoples and it's situated near the Sturt River. Just to give you a bit of an overview, this is the architect sort of view of 3D view of the village outlay. As you can see, and I'll try and use my mouse hopefully be able to see this, but there's some. The Kaurna village, the village design is actually based on a walking village concept. So on all the pathways that you'll see internally here are used to create that sense of community and connectedness with our elders. And on the outer perimeters, this is where basically where access to vehicles and where there'll be car parking, etc. The beautiful dwellings are by the river with an open site layout. Buildings are spaced to maximise amenity to the natural landscape and to allow access to the winter sun and breezes for natural ventilation, and a variety of communal zones for larger or smaller gatherings. And also we have on site a number of fire pit which will be available for elders to sit around and again creating that sense of community feel within the village itself. Okay, this is just another picture, I suppose, in the context about the front view of what the potential build would look like. And, you know, these are one-bedroom dwellings in a group of 2 or 4 arranged around loosely landscaped courtyards. And some of the work that we've been doing in regards to the outlay of the village is that there will be some new plantings, and there is a group called the Friends of Warrapringa who have been actually taking, who are a group of volunteers who for a number of years have actually been ensure about protecting the flora and fauna at Warrapringa, and we're working closely with them as well in regards to the plantings that will go into the village. So in regards to the Feminist village for residents, it's, you know, for Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander peoples aged 55 years and over. It could swing between 50 to 50, you know, 50 as well years over. That's not yet been finally determined. Currently residing in the South Australian Housing Authority housing and who are able to live independently. The Village Partnership Working Group. So we have a very strong partnership working group, and the role of our group is to oversee the management, planning and development of the project. And our key organisations and partners are the Gunner Yurta Aboriginal Corporation. We have the chair and deputy chair represented on the working group. The Gunner Punkra Property Trusts, we have the chair and one of the directors. The ACHL Estate Manager, ACHL Relationship Manager from my company that I work for. ILSC, which is Indigenous Land Sea Council Corporation. There's a divisional manager, operations manager and a project advisor. And then we have representation from the South Australian Housing Authority, the Director of Business Partnerships and the Principal Senior Project Manager. And this photo that I'm sharing with you is at our recent workshop meeting that we had where we all came together and discussing the proposal going forward, going over the plans and, you know, just getting everyone on the same page and moving forward together. So the partnership to date has actually been very successful. We are about creating a positive experience for our elders, and our team will work together to make our elders' journey a positive experience and to support them in their tenancy. We'll develop partnerships with service providers to assist our elders to maintain connection to community, family and to essential key services. And we will employ Aboriginal business enterprises to maintain the site and deliver services. And that is one of the key commitments that Aboriginal Community Housing Limited makes. It's about how we empower our communities, and we also ensure that we utilise Aboriginal business enterprises in every aspect. Our next steps going forward is that the construction of the village is proposed to commence in mid-2022. The Ghana Yurta Aboriginal Corporation are actually looking right now at what the naming of the village. We're in the process now of finalising like key documentations and agreements. So as you can see, there's a number of partnerships there, so there is a bit of work to be done around that. And we will be developing, ACHL will be developing a sub-working group to develop draft operational plans for the village, outlining the operational procedures and protocols. And we'll be doing that with the Ghana Yurta Aboriginal Corporation. And a proposal to be developed for the village centre for elders to access services, activities, family and community gatherings to support the ongoing health and wellbeing is currently being developed, and funding is yet to be sourced, for the building and the development of a centre, and we're working on that right at this time collaboratively. Before I finish the conversation, I just want to say and just remind everybody that, when we look at the statistics of our people, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, in regards to homelessness, 1 in 20 Aboriginal women are homeless in Australia. That makes 1 in 4 who are clients or specialist homelessness clients, Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander, which makes around about 25% of clients being at sea, and compared to 9% of that of non-Aboriginal people. So I think, in closing, I just want to say that initiatives such as these are very important. We're actually having commitment to reduce Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander homelessness, and we expect that predominantly a lot of the residents going into the facility will be Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander women. And the benefits of this is that that means that, and the data's that we've collated so far is that there are quite a lot of, and not a high number, but I think around about range between 20 to 60% of elders in that age group are actually living in independently and in those in Saha homes with possibly 2-3 bedroom homes, and then them coming into a village and community-like village, living together as a community, just takes me back to when I was a young woman, and how many of our elders, particularly living on country, used to be so closely connected. So this is a great opportunity, I think, going forward for our elders. The model's not going to suit everybody, and it doesn't fit everybody, but this is the first build. And what the proposal is that ILC had purchased the land, and Gunna Yurta Aboriginal Corporation have recently won their native title rights across the city of Adelaide, which is fantastic. So eventually ACHL will be managing the village on behalf of Gunna Yurta and the trust, with a view to handing that over once the lease agreements have been finalised. And yeah, so this is a great story about self-determination for Gunna Yurta Aboriginal people in South Australia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cheryl, and thank you for ending on such a positive and hopeful note. It's really wonderful to see this, the first project of its type, and I really hope that we see more of it. It's really incredible. But thank you also for bringing up those really large and dramatic statistics about the difference between Indigenous women and Indigenous people. It's really a horrifying thing that we need to be addressing. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to pass over to Erin now, who is the Program Manager for Homelessness and Affordable Housing at the Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation, an independent community foundation based in Melbourne. She's the Chair of Philanthropy Australia's Affordable Housing Funders Network and also the mastermind behind LMCF's Affordable Housing Challenge. So it's really nice to be getting that different perspective of someone who's in that philanthropy role. Thank you very much, Erin.
Thanks, Kate. I'm just loading the slides. How's that? Good?
Perfect.
Great. My name is Erin Dolan, Senior Program Manager, Homeless and Affordable Housing at the Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'm going to talk to you today about an initiative of the foundation, the Affordable Housing Challenge. I've got my email address there. If there's something I haven't covered or if you have more questions, please feel free to email me. The Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation is the community foundation for Melbourne. We have been operating for almost 100 years. We celebrate that in 2023. The foundation has a long-standing commitment to homelessness. Under this commitment, we have two outcomes we're seeking to achieve. One is increasing the supply of quality, affordable housing. The other is interventions that prevent entry into homelessness or prevent entrenchment into homelessness. And I've just seen in the chat, there's a bit of interest about philanthropy, philanthropy's role in affordable housing. If you're interested in this topic, I also chair, as Kate said, Affordable Housing Funders Network through Philanthropy Australia. So in 2017, we began an affordable housing challenge. This was done through our work with Transforming Housing, which is now the Affordable Housing Hallmark based at the University of Melbourne. It's an action research collaboration focusing on transforming housing policy in Victoria. Through that collaboration, Transforming Housing created the Housing Access Resource Tool. We call that HART for short, and it's publicly available on the University of Melbourne website. I encourage you to take a look at it. If you enter a address in Melbourne, it will give you a rating from 0 to 20 based on that address is proximity to amenities. And by amenities, we mean access to schools, fresh food, open spaces, medical services, community services, public library, etc. So in 2017, we put a request out for proposals. We ran a grant round with local council asking them to submit land parcels as landowners for the creation of affordable housing on that land. And we incentivized them through a grant of $1 million. Once we received those applications, we used a site selection criteria, again, very focused on location, because we believe that people who live in affordable housing need to have access to amenities. The site we chose was in Preston, and we partnered with Darebin City Council. As you can see from this picture, the site is in green. It's very well located. It's across from a library. It's right by Town Hall. It's got great public transport routes, very close to a market as well. And after the site and the partnership was established, we then went out to an RFP process. Looking for the right community housing provider. Housing Choices was chosen. You can see a rendering of the site there. We are getting underway. We expect the project to develop 40 units, about half, 1 bedroom and 2 bedrooms. The model is about retaining the ownership through public assets. So the council will retain the ownership. Housing Choices will develop and then lease it as well. I should just say that we expect to produce a toolkit after the very soon, which will show how we did this, including how we did the financial stack. I know that's a keen interest for many people. In 2020 and now in 2021, we switched the focus from local councils to not-for-profits. Landholders, including faith-based organizations. We're going to use their land holdings, including vacant land, strata, and even existing buildings to build more affordable housing. We've also, rather than just run a capital works grant, have included a feasibility grant. So groups that are at very early stages want to do some exploration. We've allowed for that grant as well. And I think I'll end it there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Erin. And I've been involved in this project for a while, but it's still so exciting every time you present on it to hear how it's progressing. And also really excited to hear that discussion about toolkits and sharing of knowledge. And I hope that I get time to ask that question because it's such an important aspect, that replication and scalability element. So thank you. So our final presentation for today is from Rebekah Oelkers, who is the CEO of Brisbane Housing Company, which is one of the largest community housing providers in Queensland. She's worked in the field of community and affordable housing for the past 19 years. She's the Deputy Chair of the Community Housing Industry Association and a board member of the Urban Development Institute of Australia, Queensland branch. They've delivered a range of projects focused on older people, and we're very lucky to have her here today to talk about it. So thank you very much, Rebekah.
Thank you very much, Kate. Really appreciate that. And I'm really, really thrilled to be here. Everyone, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today. I'm meeting on Jagra and Terrible land and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. And I also just want to say a very, very big thank you to Linda and Penny for explaining their situations and their lived experience in the earlier session. I can absolutely relate to those stories from the point of view that we hear these stories all the time, every day, day in, day out, and we're really, really focused on providing additional affordable housing for older Australians. So Brisbane Housing Company is a not-for-profit organisation. We're a developer and also an operator. We're a public benevolent institution, and we've actually developed around 2,000 units of accommodation over the 18 years that we've been around. And we own our portfolio, and then we rent out our accommodation at a discount to market rent, usually less than 74.9%, but also usually capped at around 30% of somebody's income. So that's a really, really important point. And we've delivered a range of housing options that are available for older women, including 215 units with within purpose-built seniors complexes. So whilst we haven't designed specific housing for women, the reality is that the vast majority of our older residents are women. And as I said before, we are seeing that more and more and more. There's a real prevalence of older women coming through our doors. And so we're really very passionate about providing housing that will meet their needs. We're looking to grow the supply of our homes significantly over the next 5 to 7 years. And as I say, like BHC has done 2,000 units, we could do so much more. We've got the development capacity, we've got the operational capacity, we build places people love to live, but it all depends on funding, absolutely all depends on funding. And so I was thrilled to hear some of the politicians speaking earlier and about the will for this. It is just so important to have the will. So I wanted to show you a couple of the complexes that we have. So you can see the slides in front of you there. Firstly, on the left-hand side, you can see Syrah and Bowen Court. And these are examples of affordable long-term rentals in dedicated seniors complexes. So Syrah, the top one here, it is a unit complex of 30 units. 20 of those are for elderly residents. And we find that the majority of those are older women, single older women who have been in all sorts of different situations, but certainly have had that gender pay gap, inequity, and a number of different things in their lives, which mean that they absolutely need the affordable housing. So 20 there for older women, and then the remaining 10 are actually owner occupied. So a lot of our buildings are mixed tenure, mixed use, to really have a good mix of community in each of the buildings. The second one there down the bottom is called Bowen Court, and that was actually a joint venture that we did with Blue Care. It was a very old, rundown aged care facility. BHC actually did a renovation on it and has rejuvenated it into 51 beautiful units of seniors accommodation. And the seniors that live there love it. They don't want to ever move out. So that's those two. And as I said before, in those two complexes, we rent out at 75% of market or less. So basically looking at around the 30% of somebody's income. Over here, you can see two of our other complexes. One is Kagra House up the top. That is 57 units of accommodation for elderly people. And then below that, Benson Place. Both of these are examples of affordable long-term rentals for active elderly people who are downsizing from public housing. So this is for people who have lived in public housing all their lives and now potentially don't need the 4-bedroom house or the 3-bedroom house and can actually move into a unit, either a 1-bedroom or a 1-bedroom plus multi-purpose room. These were specifically designed to be able to have people move from public housing and free up those public housing units. And when we did these two complexes, so one is for 57 units and one is for 35, seriously, we would have spoken to about 700 people and we could have filled these units many, many, many times over. The demand was just absolutely so strong. And again, once people live there, the sense of community is fantastic. They love it. They don't want to leave. If we can just move to the very next slide, please. This particular slide is talking about Arbor Sherwood. And Arbor Sherwood is BHC's first affordable retirement living complex. So this is this one down here. So essentially what we realized at BHC was that in fact there were a number of seniors and particularly women who might have a little bit of equity in a home, not a lot, probably not a lot to actually go and move into a typical or mainstream retirement village, but that they needed to be able to utilize that equity in a way that was actually going to get them a home and a roof over their head and long-term secure affordable accommodation. So we built this affordable retirement village and essentially brought about a new rental model. So rather than your typical model where people buy in at the rate that they buy in at, we've actually got 3 financial models. So people can buy in with a very, very small amount of equity and pay a rent, or a medium amount of equity and pay a smaller rent, or just buy in at a normal model with a DMF, deferred management fee. So we found that to be terrific. And again, that complex, which is 52 units, largely the singles are women, older women who did not have any other options. And most of them have bought in on module 1, which is the very small amount of equity and then choosing to pay a rent, all of which is very affordable. The community that has been developed there is just lovely, absolutely astounding, and it's been life-changing for those people. On the right hand here, I've just actually also included 2 examples of BHC's general affordable housing stock, because honestly, so many older residents are happy to live in a mixed tenure community. They're not necessarily looking to live with other seniors. As long as it is affordable for them, then that's a real positive. And those complexes there, as with all of ours, are rented out at the 75% or less of market rent. So it's affordable for people. In terms of delivering older women's housing in general, we have taken particular care to ensure that we're designing that built form and making sure that we're doing the service delivery for older people correctly. But to be honest, some things just are constants across good affordable housing design. Erin was talking before about proximity to amenities, public transport and shops, so important. Good design elements like cross-flow ventilation, good solar orientation to make sure that the costs of living are reduced, and then really lovely architectural design too, to make sure that the places are practical, livable, and also beautiful, so people have a sense of pride in where they live. We find that's really important. We also undertook 2 longitudinal research studies when we did the decanting of people from public housing into our complexes, and we found some really important things were unveiled. They're not rocket science, but the importance of creating community connection, the importance of having ongoing holistic housing management and caretakers in the site to keep the complexes looking beautiful, ensuring homes provide the opportunity to age in place. Safety and security were really, really big elements and things that we take very, very seriously in all of our developments. And also having additional space to accommodate things like caring and family responsibilities. A lot of elderly people were still looking after grandkids, for instance, and needed to have them be able to stay in their complexes. So having them not too small so that they were able to do that. And look, just to end by saying, in terms of what do we need from government, it's funding, and more funding and better coordination. Honest to goodness, it is just funding and coordination across all levels of government that we need. A national housing strategy is also what we need. Funding sources that are sufficient, predictable, and long-term so we can actually plan and we can get more of these products on the ground. It's absolutely doable. And as Tanya Plibersek said before, it's really about having the will.
Great, thank you so much, Rebekah. And a really great point to end on is that there's all of this energy here. It's about gathering the will and prioritising what really matters. I wanted to start with a question for you, since you're already up and in the mood. And it was about going back to your comment about those retirement villages. And a conversation that came up quite a lot last year at the at-risk event was about this term, the middle women, which is increasingly amounts of women who come to this point with a level of equity, but not enough to purchase a home through an outright mortgage process. And so I'm wondering, this seems like a really excellent solution. How scalable is this? I know you have those projects, but are there a lot more in the pipeline, and how replicable is it?
The affordable retirement is extremely replicable. It's not a model that makes a lot of money. It is an affordable model. It's not something that you can use to kind of cross-subsidise it. It is quite a lean model, but it is absolutely replicable. BHC actually did that model with our own funding. So we didn't get any government funding for that. And it was really a bit of a trial, a pilot, because we could see that there was this missing group out there. Because we house people right across the continuum. We house people who have been previously homeless, who are in social housing, but then also this group that kind of can't rent in the private rental market, you know, oftentimes. And I think we heard from both Linda and Penny this morning that they were spending 70% of their income in private rental. We find this all the time. It's absolutely unaffordable. So for women, for instance, who have got a little bit of equity, being able to put that into somewhere where you can have a roof over your head and put down roots and know that it is secure for you in perpetuity for the long term is absolutely fantastic. And it is replicable. And it's a model where people can still have money left over to put food on the table, to do the things that they want to do. It's not taking up every last cent. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that preventing those people from falling into homelessness is a really important goal in itself, not just from the economic perspective, but from the self-esteem perspective for those women. We need to actually be addressing these issues sooner rather than later and avoiding that spiral into homelessness.
Absolutely. And self-esteem and also health and well-being. Health and well-being, sorry. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
I wanted to pick up a question that came up into the chat near the beginning of this session to Peter, which was about how local councils can be really proactive in supporting projects like the one that you were talking about today. Did you have a comment on that, Peter? And anyone else could jump in from the panel too if they had something.
Yeah, we did work closely with our local council in providing support for the project, and a couple of councillors in particular provided quite a bit of support, but working with council officers to get the design and the planning right so that we can, this is under the big housing bill, it's subject to state government approval, but you still need to meet all the requirements under local government planning scheme. So having that support and proactive support of councils and council officers is really helpful, but in the longer term, identifying land that may become available in the future is a really important thing, and we are involved with a group that is looking at that. Like there's a redevelopment of the Braybrook suburb in the future, and maybe council can assist in identifying land that might be suitable for social housing outcomes. So yeah, there's a number of ways, but I think it's really important to try and establish good friendships and a champion within the local councillors if possible. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to pass to Erin to respond to that too. And also I'll put in a plug in the interim when Erin mentioned that heart mapping tool. Another part of that process was identifying pieces of land, particularly council pieces of land. So if anyone is trying to, you know, shake down their local council, then I'll find a link and put it in the chat.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. We funded Chia Vic, who is the peak body in Victoria for community housing providers, to look at, to create some toolkits for community housing providers to interact with the councils as well as the larger communities when community housing are coming in. They're about to launch that toolkit. And indeed, I think I may even have a link I'll plug into the chat as well. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. While you're talking, Erin, I'd like to ask you a question. And it comes back to a few comments that have been in the chat today and in the earlier session about smaller groups looking for funding for projects. And that question about how philanthropy can be involved. Do you find that philanthropy is looking for larger, more sophisticated outfits, or is there also a role in working with smaller, more fine-grained or localized solutions?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. We would certainly work with both. And we'd also be very interested, I think, in trialing or testing. We think the place for philanthropy is separate to government. So sort of pushing the boundaries of what either government can't do or is unwilling to do. We like to call our funding risk capital. So whoever is prepared to take those risks, come up with new, innovative, replicable solutions, and then ideally the government can then use those trials and scale them to the broader community.
Thank you. I love those terms. I love this focus on scaling up the things that work. My next question is to Cheryl. And I wanted to comment on the fact that two amazing things happened, and I'm sure that they're not a coincidence, that this project was supported this year, and also that South Australia launched its first Aboriginal housing strategy. And in that strategy, it identified this project as one of its key actions. I'm just wondering if you have any comments on how community housing groups or community organisations can be really proactive in bringing state level governments along for the journey.
Yeah, well, I suppose, you know, in the context of developing the partnerships is really crucial, and working together. And I think what we have, you know, across the sector, and I can only talk about, you know, from SA perspective, is, you know, it would be great to see more collaboration even between the community housing, agencies and coming together and actually. I mean, one of the biggest gaps that I see, and what I really do like about the Aboriginal housing strategy, is that there is a focus for the very first time on Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander peoples in the housing realm, and also, commitment given by the state government. But what we also need to look at is how do we actually, how does that strategy and how is that meaningful to the other community housing providers who also provide housing for Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander peoples? Because, when we look at those statistics that I shared before, we need to have a stronger focus on priority for Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander peoples to be considered and put forward and foremost, because of the great need and the great underrepresentation that we have with people in housing. So I suppose for me, and the learning lessons is about the engagement with community at the community level and for Aboriginal community-led decisions. And, there was this great opportunity that, with the example that I've given, where Ghana in particular have been really at the forefront and leading what it is that they want to see. So it's about listening to the voices of community and following through on the vision and working, the best way to actually do that and being, mindful that there's a number of partnerships and bureaucracies that you have to work through. But I think having that genuine commitment of working together to me is number one. And, putting, First Nations people needs for first and foremost in my view.
Absolutely, and not thinking about that in a silo. And I think that goes back to a comment that someone made long ago in the chat about feeling that housing solutions can feel really disparate and it's very confusing to navigate that. So if we don't have a shared strategy and a shared vision that looks after people across that spectrum, then, we run the risk of people getting lost in that big old system that's very complicated.
We do, and I just think sometimes the system, it becomes more important than the need, and that's what we have to focus on. That's the only way we're going to get the best outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 4 minutes left before we get shunted back into the main group for a wrap up from Karen. And so I'm doing a quick round to each of our panelists. The question is, if you could say one thing to our political panel from earlier today that we could put to them very forcefully, what would your one comment be or piece of advice be? And I might go, actually, I was going to start with Peter, but I think he's had the least forewarning of this question. So maybe I'll start with Cheryl. What would your piece of advice be?
Well, I think, my key advice is, about, again, what we've been talking about, partnerships and having a bipartisan approach to this very, serious national issue. We have politics playing too many games, wanting to have their own brand on, the way that they want to deliver message and deliver policy and outcomes. So for me, that's the number one aspect. And, the housing crisis, particularly for women and for the ageing population. But we know this has been an ongoing issue for in my view, over 20, 30 years. We knew that this was going to be happening and be an end result. So there's been a lack of planning, in my view, from government who have known about this, this context, for years. So bipartisan, stop fighting over the issues and come with one vision.
Thank you. Erin, do you want to go next?
Thanks, Kate. We support Everybody's Home. I actually think they're speaking in a separate section with Kate Colvin. So I'm glad I've only told you about that at the end of the session today. But one of the things that they are very strong advocates for, which Tanya already mentioned, is a national housing scheme. It seems so silly that each level of government sort of pushes the responsibility to different levels. It would be great if we could just have a plan of action or some type of agreement throughout the 3 levels of government.
Yes, thank you. Rebekah, what would you like to say?
Yeah, we are all the same here. We are in united voice, because at the end of the day, the federal government sets the tone on the kind of Australia that we want to have and what we accept for our older Australians. And if you want to see real tangible increases in housing supply, then you need to show leadership, and you need to put your money where your mouth is and set up a scheme that's going to directly fund not-for-profit developers and community housing organisations to build really fantastic affordable housing for older Australian women. And we need to do it at scale. So it's not a pilot project. It's not a little bit of money here and a little bit of money there. It's at scale. It's got to be something that can be predictable, and it's got to be something we can leverage, and it's got to be now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And Peter, what would you like to say?
Yeah, thank you, Kate. I would, to Tanya Plibersek particularly, hopefully our future Prime Minister, that she really lobby hard her party to redirect all that funding that goes to rich people and investors through tax breaks, that be redirected back to social housing, and that we can build more models like ours for low-income renters that provide security, affordability, empowerment, a sense of place, and a healthy space to live. And I really think Labor got to pick up that they did have a good policy, they've dropped it, and Tanya's in a position where she can bring that back on the agenda. And I think it's so critical, as we need that funding.
Yes, absolutely. And it was really heartbreaking to see that change in policy. So we do need to keep pushing that line. Come on.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, I think I probably have 20 seconds to fill the gap before we move. So I will conclude by saying the purpose of this event has been to move from awareness to action. We're sick of talking about the same problems over and over again. As Cheryl just said, it's been 30 years. In fact, it's been longer talking about the same things. So it's really nice to see that things are happening. But yes, we need to be pushing that responsibility and that need back into all three levels of government, so that we're not doing bits and pieces here and there. We're doing something that's big and at scale and large enough to make a legitimate difference.